Hey, it's Bobby from brewhardware.com, and today we're going to be talking about putting a pump in your brew house. Now, we get a lot of questions from customers ranging from, why do I even need a pump? I see you sell pumps, I see that they're really popular, but I don't get it. I already brew good beer and I'm happy with my process, so why do I need one? Well, you don't really need one. There are a few reasons why you might like one in the future, and I'll tell you a little bit about what the thresholds are as to why you would add a pump to your brewery. And then we're going to talk about the various styles of pumps that are available. And then finally, we're going to talk about what type of plumbing we recommend using, how to actually physically hook a pump into your brewery. Now let's cover the first question. The first question is, why do I even need a pump? As you're brewing right now, you're probably draining liquids either by gravity or by letting them drain into a bucket and then physically pouring that bucket into the next process. Now, I started brewing all grain that way. I had a single pot and I had a single mash tun, and whenever I needed to move liquid from one of those vessels to the other, I would drain it into a bucket, lift that bucket up, and dump it into the next vessel. Now, that worked fine for 5-gallon batches, and I was totally comfortable doing that. But as I started growing into larger batch sizes, like 10, 12 gallons, I found that I was filling this bucket up to like the 5-gallon mark, and I'm pouring this water into the mash tun, and it's 175 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm splashing it all over the place, and I'm getting myself wet, and I found it to be a little bit too dangerous to keep doing it that way. So that's where I started looking into getting a pump for my own brewery, and I was a lot happier moving liquid in a safe manner, and I didn't have to lift up all that weight during the brew day either. Okay, so that might be just enough of the impetus that you need to go ahead and get a pump as you move into larger batch sizes. Now, aside from the safety aspect of pouring a large volume of hot liquid around, you might be doing other techniques that would benefit from a pump. For example, if you're using the all-grain fly sparging technique and you have all of your vessels in a multi-tier system so that you can gravity drain all of those liquids, you might find it a lot easier to lower some of those vessels down to a more manageable height so that you don't have to climb up on ladders and things like that. Now, in order to fly sparge in the all-grain process, you have to move 2 different liquids simultaneously at about the same flow rate. So instead of using gravity, you might pull your hot liquor tank down 1 level and use a pump to pump that liquor into the mash tun. Now, you could still use gravity for the second flow if you want to, or even lower all 3 vessels down to a single tier so that you can use 2 pumps to move those liquids. Now, that is kind of a daunting thing to upgrade to right away, but as you can see, every time you add a pump to your system, you can reduce your gravity drains down 1 level and then end up with a nice manageable system eventually. Now, as you step into even more advanced brewing systems like RIMS or HERM systems, those by very definition require you to recirculate your mash. So you have your mash tun full of your grain and your hot liquor, and these systems will take some of the wort out of the bottom of the mash tun, send them through the pump, and then back up to the top of the mash, and you keep recirculating that. Now finally, the last thing I'll mention, which isn't necessarily a reason to go out and buy a pump, but certainly is a great feature once you already have one or decided to get one, and that's storing the chilling operation of your wort. Now, even if you have an immersion chiller, you've probably found out that if you keep the wort moving, like by stirring it with a spoon or by jostling the chiller around, you greatly increase your chilling efficiency. Now, another way of achieving that in an easier way is to recirculate your boiled wort using a pump. You drain it out of the bottom, you send it through the pump, and then you have the outlet kind of whirlpool that wort around the coils. Now, that's a much more hands-off process than manually stirring, and also it helps you to sort of get your trube cone in the center of the pot while you're chilling. Now, if you don't want to use an immersion chiller, adding a pump to your brewery also allows you to add an external heat exchanger, such as a plate chiller or a counterflow chiller, which can be used with a gravity drain process, but it is much more easy to do if you have a pump. For one thing, you can pump hot wort through these chillers and back into the top of the kettle as a sanitizing step, so you don't have to do that separately. So in summary, if you're asking why you need a pump for your brewery, you probably don't. You will eventually get to the point where you'll be moving liquids at such a volume that you don't feel safe doing it anymore, or you'll just try to get into a more complicated or advanced brew system that actually requires a pump. So now you decided that you want to put a pump in your brewery. The next natural question would be, which pump should I get? Now, we looked at all the different options out there as far as manufacturers and models for pumps that are appropriate for use in a home brewery. And we chose chugger pumps for two different reasons. One is that there's no other pump out there that gives you the value for the money. Now, the second reason is that they're very customer focused. For one thing, these pumps are really easy to troubleshoot, and whenever we did have a problem, Chugger as a manufacturer definitely helps out the customer. So we stand behind them as much as they do. Now let's look at the three base model chugger pumps that you have to choose from. The first is the polysulfone plastic headed version. Now this is your entry level pump for the budget conscious buyer, and it has all the same specifications that all three of these pumps have. The only downside is that the pump head is plastic. Now you have to be a little bit more careful when you thread on your stainless steel fittings that you don't cross thread or strip out the threads. You also want to be a little bit more delicate with this pump so that you don't crank onto like a ball valve or step on it or anything like that, because you can crack the head. The upgraded version of that inline design is the stainless steel inline head version. Again, same pumping specifications as the plastic head, but it is a more durable material, and some people want to have as little plastic in their brewery as possible. Now the third option is the center inlet head, and it takes the inlet from the side and actually puts it directly into the front of the housing, right where the impeller is. And in theory, this pump has a slight increase or edge in performance when you start pumping boiling liquids or near boiling liquids. So if you can accommodate having the inlet come from the front, this is the pump to buy. If you like the idea of a more compact form factor, then the inline head is the better choice. Realistically, in our testing, there has been very little difference between these two pump designs. You probably will not see a difference between the two, so now it's just a personal preference. Now, one thing I wanted to mention about the choice of pumps is that if you're on a limited budget right now, you can get into the plastic pump now and then later on upgrade to a stainless head, because we do stock replacement heads in both designs to interchange with this motor. All three of these pumps have exactly the same motor, so the heads are interchangeable. So you've decided to buy one of these pumps. The next logical question is, how exactly should I hook this into my brewery? Now, before I get into the specifics of the fittings that I recommend using for these pumps, I will say generally you want to avoid constrictive fittings or low flow fittings. Now you want to use tubing that's at least 1/2 inch inside diameter at a minimum, and then when you connect this to various fittings, be sure that the hose barbs are not overly constrictive, like down to 3/8 or 1/4 inch ID. You'll also want to look inside your kettles or kegs. If you've got dip tubes that are restrictive, you might want to consider replacing them with full flow 1/2 inch ID components. Alright, so let's talk about hooking this pump up for the first time if you're running on a budget and you want to do it as inexpensively as possible. The first thing you're going to need to do is get a valve. This is a 2-piece valve. We also have 3-piece valves that you can use. I'll have a video about what the difference is later on. But you want to put a valve on the output of the pump so that you can regulate the flow speed. In fact, you can even use a valve to completely block the flow temporarily without doing any damage to these pumps. That's the benefit of having a magnetic drive. So you definitely want to put a valve on there. Now the cheapest way to hook a hose to this would be to use hose barbs. Now we have a 5/8 hose barb with 1/2 inch MPT female thread on it. So you're going to use Teflon tape to thread this on permanently. And then we have the reverse thread version. This is a 1/2 inch MPT male thread with a 5/8 hose barb on this side. And you're going to thread that into the ball valve. Now as far as tubing is concerned, a lot of people take the cheap way out and go to the home center and buy clear PVC tubing. And you don't really want to use that stuff. It's not really rated for temperatures over 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So especially when you're going to be transferring boiling or near boiling liquids, you want to get a good high temperature tubing like a thermoplastic or a silicone tubing. We have some extremely clear silicone tubing that's good for up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's completely food grade. So this is 1/2 inch ID, 3/4 OD, and nice and thick walled, so it's not going to crush or kink on you. You can go ahead and push this tubing over the 5/8 barb, no problem, because it's flexible enough to do so. And you could put some hose on the inlet side and some hose on the outlet side and hook them up to corresponding hose barbs on your vessels that you want to go from and to, and then you're set up for pretty cheap. The problem is that every time you go to clean this or disconnect anything or make or break connections on various vessels, you're going to have to pull the hose off of the barbs. And after this has been on there for a while, or if you use clamps, you're going to start damaging the end of the hose. You're going to have to cut off a fresh piece and keep reattaching like that. Again, if you're on a budget, that's the way to get into it without spending too much. But we recommend using a quick disconnect system instead. And for our money, we really like the cam lock system. The cam locks are, a two-part system where you push the male part in there and then you close the arms, and that makes a positive seal. They have silicone gaskets inside. They're easily replaceable, and you're all stainless. There's nothing really to break in this system. Selecting the appropriate cam locks for connecting a pump in your brewery is a little bit of a daunting task, especially if you don't have any experience with them. There are a lot of different configurations, and they're named with somewhat arbitrary titles like the A type or the F type, for example. We have seen some customer frustration with selecting the appropriate pieces, so we decided to put a package together to take a lot of that guesswork out, especially for the first-time owner of some of these cam locks. We call it the Pump Connection Kit, and it's available as an accessory to one of the pumps. Whether you bought the pump from brewhardware.com or another vendor, you can purchase the Pump Connection Kit as an add-on to the pump itself. So we're going to talk about what is included in the kit as well as how to put it together. Now the first thing is it comes with a valve. Like I said, we highly recommend using a valve on the output of the pump, so we include that. It comes standard with a 2-piece valve, but you can optionally upgrade to the 3-piece variety. We'll talk about what the differences are and what the benefits are for the 3-piece at another time. Now you get a Type A cam lock that threads onto the inlet of the pump, and a Type F, which threads into the output of the ball valve. And now that's how you equip the pump to be able to be ready to add your hoses to it. Now you're going to get 10 feet of our high temperature clear silicone tubing to use however you wish. As a general rule of thumb, you're probably going to use about 4 feet on the inlet side of the pump and about 6 feet on the outlet. Usually you're going to hook into the drain side of a vessel into the pump, and then from outside of here usually up to the top of another vessel. So you'll find that you'll need a little bit longer of a length on the output side, but you can use your discretion as to how you cut that into the 2 pieces of hose. You're going to get what we call the Cam BL kit, which is a Type B and an L barb for the hose to attach to, and a big C, which is the same version with a direct straight hose barb on it. So this is how we recommend making up your hose set. So this represents one of your hoses, and you'll have exactly a duplicate version for the other side. So what's nice about the BL is that when you couple it onto your ball valve drain on your vessels, you could see that the tubing comes straight down so it doesn't kink once there's a lot of liquid inside the tubing. All right, and then you'd hook that to the inlet of the pump like this. Now notice we do include 4 hose clamps that are made specifically for clamping onto silicone hose or silicone tubing. So you can go ahead and use those to better secure the tubing to the barbs. So we're showing one of the hose sets being made up here. You get the identical matching set for the other side of the pump with the BL and the big C for the second hose that you're going to make up like this. And now you'll end up with a female coupling on both ends of the hoses, and that's the end of the pump connection kit from there. Now, in order to make use of this pump connection kit, you will need to have male cam locks on all of the ports that you want to connect the hoses to. This is a Type F that is commonly threaded into the outlet of a ball valve, but there's also the type A that has female threads, so if you have a recirculation port or something like that, just take a look at the details on the Camlock page as to whether you need an A or an F or maybe one of the other varieties. But the pump connection kit does not include the male ports that the hoses will clamp onto. All right, you get right up to this point on both sides of the hose. All right, I hope that answers a lot of your questions about how to hook a pump up and what our pump connection kit comes with and how it's assembled. Again, use Teflon tape on all threaded MPT connections. Use your hose clamps on your hoses to keep the hoses from popping off. And I think you're going to find that adding the pump into your system with our pump connection kit is a lot less challenging than if you were trying to piece it together by yourself. Now, certainly if you have any questions about how to set up a pump in your brewery or anything about our pump connection kits, please send me an email at bobby@brewhardware.com and I'll be sure to answer it right away. Thanks a lot.